Welcome to the Four Rooms podcast, where we explore the four rooms of entrepreneurship: health, wealth, scale, and relationships. Each episode is dedicated to opening new doors and uncovering insights that empower you to design your entrepreneurial journey to be both lucrative and fulfilling. And now, your hosts, Amber Spears and Brett Kaufman.
Well, I'm here with the legendary Kevin Richards, who is the COO of ClickFunnels. And he's here sitting down with me having a conversation. I already have a long list of questions that I want to ask him. But I'd love to just start with you, Kevin. Tell me a little bit about how you came to be the COO of ClickFunnels and maybe a bit about your background getting into this operator number two kind of role. Like, what did you do before ClickFunnels? I would just love to hear that transition period for you.
For me, the story starts, I won't tell all the story, but I really started when we're actually in Pasadena right now, and I was going to Art Center right up the hill here. And I got an opportunity to work for someone and start my first job. And that job was with basically what I didn't even know at the time. I was 22 years old, was an entrepreneur. And I said yes, because the whole point of going to college is to get a job anyways.
Right.
So when someone offers you a job, I'm like, okay, this makes sense. And from that point forward, and that's been, I don't want to do the math, but it's been 30 plus years, well, 30 years anyways. I've literally just snowballed and always worked right next to or right behind just real strong visionary entrepreneurs. And it wasn't by design. It wasn't by any specific path or activity. It's just always where I've seen to find myself. And it's a natural fit for me, basically. So I did that. That was a smaller startup that then worked for him on another project, which failed because that's what sometime entrepreneurial visionaries do. And then we started buy.com, just literally him and I and one developer in a room back in late 90s, and just had the chance to do that again. And when you have success, it opens the door for the next one. So, like, oh, you use that, co-founder of buy.com, working with a visionary, it's easier to get the next one. And then that one hits, then it's easier to get the next one. So literally just spent it just went so fast, but 30 years just saying yes to visionaries, meeting with them, getting into their business and doing what I do, which is taking their visionary chaos and turning into operational, I don't want to say excellence, but operational simplicity, basically. And same thing with ClickFunnels. So ClickFunnels was at a point in its business where Dave, the CEO at the time, found out he had brain cancer, and he was the glue of the company that allowed Russell to do all the magic and wonderful things that Russell does as a person, allowed Todd to build the technology that he does, and that glue was gone. So Russell reached out to my previous founder I worked with, Kenny at Kajabi, which is ironic, and said, hey, I need help. And Kenny said, you should talk to Kevin. I flew in what I thought was a 3-day come help me figure things out to help Russell kind of get sorted, figure out what was going on in the business. I didn't know it was my first 3 days of working there. That wasn't disclosed. But ever since that first day, him and I have just worked side by side, and we align really well. And I just love doing what I do, which allows him to do what he does.
I'm really curious. I feel like so many podcasts or, kind of stories revolve around the visionary, right? Because they had the story in their mind. They thought of the thing, they started building it. But really, I don't see as much information around the operators. And I just think that that's a really exciting thing for me to be able to talk to you about, because ClickFunnels is a very large company, right? And I'm really curious, you as someone who's been behind a lot of these visionaries, like, how do they attract somebody at the world-class level that you are? I know that you mentioned that you're like a unicorn. So I'm curious, like, how does one attract a unicorn into their business? If they're watching this, they're like, man, like, if I had a Kevin next to me as a visionary, like, my company would scale. How do you go about finding someone like you? And then how do you identify that this is the right visionary for you and your particular skill sets and where you want to go?
Yep. There's so many different ways you can approach it. Russell likes using personality profiles, disc profiles specifically. And I think that's valuable. But for me, what I've seen is so many times a visionary or CEO or founder is looking for someone to take over the business instead of help them run the business. And what I usually find works best is the opposite of that. Rocket Fuel is a good example. I think it's a good book that gives kind of people at least a inspirational version of it and gives you an idea what's possible. But an integrator is someone who understands the vision that the visionary has and can actually translate it into operational procedures and KPIs and OKRs and all the things that would crush a visionary to even think about. But it all starts with understanding the vision, not understanding the operations. So I think the answer, you asked me this earlier, so I had a chance to sneak and think about it a little bit. The answer is find the person that understands the vision, but is good at operations. Don't find someone that's good at operations and then hope they find the vision. Right? So it doesn't matter if you're a nonprofit, doesn't matter if you're a startup, doesn't matter if you're a large operational company. Every company runs off the vision, off a mission, what they're trying to accomplish, the customer and why they serve. Like at ClickFunnels, it's super clear for us. So if you don't align there, and Russell and I absolutely align there, right? Like enabling entrepreneurs to start online businesses, him and I are both obsessed with. And then we just do what we're good at.
I'm curious too, like when this happened with Dave and you kind of stepped in, what were some things that you might have, like, I'm sure you operated differently in some ways than him. So I'm curious, like, you coming in with this big loss, right? Like, this was a huge loss for the community. It was a huge loss for ClickFunnels. How did you navigate coming in at that time? And what are some like changes that you made or any fears that you might have had? Because it's not like someone left, right? It's not like someone was fired or went on to start a different company. It was somebody who was really sick and passed away that was like this key part of that fabric of the company. And I'm really curious what that must have felt like to step into that and what came up for you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, no one's Dave. So if you knew Dave Woodward, not going to cry. If you knew Dave Woodward, he was one of the most magical men, powerful, but also his heart was true. And what I did is I didn't try to replace it. I didn't try to fill any of his superpowers. And him and I had different superpowers as well. So I left that space open for a little bit, actually a long bit, probably two years, where I didn't try and fill what Dave left. Instead, I came in specifically in the areas that he wasn't as strong as, and he would tell you this today if he was here. And I focused on that first. Instead of trying to step into his shoes, I actually left him and just looked at what the company needed. And they didn't need another Dave. They needed someone different to kind of let them know everything was going to be okay. And every single day was going to be okay. And we'd get to the cheerleading and the motivational side of the things eventually.
So it sounds like that's one of the things he was really good at was the motivational like part. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. The motivation, doing this kind of thing, connecting, being in rooms, knowing people, knowing their names, knowing their stories, both inside and outside the company. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you came in, what was the feeling of like the team? Like how, I hear that you're being really like cautious in that, right? So it sounds like to me, there's been some really interesting transition periods you've come in for. One was Dave being sick and that transition. Two was, rebuilding ClickFunnels from the ground up and spending time doing that. And then 3 is this new kind of transition period you guys are in as a company as well. So I'm really curious, like, how have you navigated through these 3 different transition periods? Like you as the integrator, like how are you keep your morale high? How are you like, rallying the team around these things? I'm really curious to hear that from your perspective.
Yeah. You say it in 3 things, but it felt like one all at once. And in some way it probably was. But the first thing I did is really look at it as 2 different businesses at the time. So we see ClickFunnels today as a startup, basically. And ClickFunnels Classic was a legacy product that we were still, at the time I joined, still promoting, but knew we were not going to really continue any development on it. So that was a very operational part of it, where it's just like running the day-to-day, the ad spend, like really those type of the business. But then also looking toward the future and knowing we had a 2-year plus development cycle for a brand new startup company. And those are two dramatically different things. And the company was running in two dramatically different ways, basically. And so what I did is try and bridge as many basically gaps that the company had, because when ClickFunnels was being launched and Classic was being not put to rest, but put as a secondary piece, the team that built ClickFunnels today wasn't even attached to the company. So really what I started doing is just bridging all the communications, all the teams, and bringing it into like eliminating silos effectively. And they weren't by design, but they were at some level by necessity, so that one company could keep running while a brand new startup was running on the side.
There's quite a few people that are listening to this that I feel like are doing that actively, and it's like, how do you like in my perspective, I'm thinking of multiple different people in our community right now that have like kind of like a flagship legacy thing that they're known for, and then they're starting either complementary like additions to that business that they feel like is going to be their future, how ClickFunnels is now, or they're starting ancillary supportive businesses on that. And I'd be curious to hear from your perspective, like how are you able to keep the drumbeat going for like the legacy kind of product that everyone knows about while still building this thing and keeping the team focus on both things? And how do you manage maybe fears that the legacy team might have? Is there still going to be a place for me? That whole, like, when you say the bridging, like, how did you give me some examples of that and any advice that you might have for people in that position?
Yeah, I want to give examples now, more so than in the past, because one, we're actually doing that again. So ClickFunnels is working on something new that we can't tell anyone about yet, but it's a very similar process. And a lot of the motivation came from 37 Signals and what they did with Basecamp. A lot of our development philosophies comes from a lot of their things. A lot of motivation for our engineers come from that side. But what we're doing now, which I think is how we probably could have done it better last time, is communication through the process. One, on what we're doing, better communication company-wide of what we're doing on the new initiative, which gets everyone more excited about it and feel like they're involved in it. And that was probably a miss last time because we were trying to keep it so quiet to the point where half the company didn't know it was being done for the first 6 months. And the second thing is we have a very clear roadmap for the current product. So everyone knows why we're doing it. They know the problem we solve next, but we also have not even a exciting, like world-changing vision for ClickFunnels as a product in itself. So taking those two things together and then communicating them company-wide, consistently aligned with the basics of what we do, why we do it, why what we do matters. It's really just communication. So it was a long-winded way of me answering the question, is just communication, better communication, constant communication across leadership, which is really important, but more importantly, communication across the entire company. And the other thing we did, which is different this time, which I think changed a lot of the dynamic, we actually got rid of, and this is going to be controversial, we got rid of all middle management. So we don't have anyone on the team that isn't a specific responsible leader or actually actively doing something as a task or a mission or a goal. So we don't have engineers that just manage engineers. Every engineer writes code. We don't have support agents that just manage other support agents. Every support agent or success agent answers tickets and helps customers. We don't have any marketing person that doesn't actively work on funnels or campaigns and just manages people.
Wow. So when did you make that decision? And what was that? Did you have to get rid of middle managers when you made that decision? Like,
Yeah.
I'm really curious about that.
We actually did it first in the engineering team. And it was a conscious decision early on. That's how ClickFunnels was built, with that philosophy. And we saw how well it worked. And we learned from it too. And then we looked at the rest of the company and realized the more managers you have, the harder it is to find responsibility and accountability. And honestly, you got to the point where if you don't know who's responsible, you don't know who's going to finish something. And we just had to get clear on all the initiatives we have across the company, knowing who is responsible. Instead of, I wish, we got rid of words like I wish, we should, I thought. All those words are gone. Like, that just doesn't happen. Because we know when we sit in the room as a leadership team, it's one of us in the room, which there's 9 of us in the room, and we know who's responsible every time. So it just eliminates all confusion. But yeah, some of it was hard, but it wasn't just eliminating, it was giving them, you actually have to do stuff, and some of it was hard conversations. Some people weren't the right people for the bus. Some people found new seats on the bus. It was a lot of logistical conversations, also some tough ones, but with a clear vision that we could explain to people why we're doing it.
And how did that change? Like, when you made that decision, what were some things that you noticed, like, right away from the
Buy-in.
different teams? Buy-in.
Just started the same process on the last department, which was our success and support team. And within 5 days of implementing it, the team is different. The energy is different. The dynamic's different. They feel connected. They feel like they have a voice because there's one layer removed. It's been cool.
And I'm curious, how did you identify who was going to be like the responsible leads in it? Was it people that to you were like, they were like the most technically skilled engineer, so they should be the one? Or is it more somebody that perhaps was best at corralling and like motivating, more of like a visionary type of engineer in that department? Like, how did you make that decision? Or was it somebody raising their hand and saying, I kind of want this leadership position on the engineering team?
Yeah. Moving around, we definitely made some wrong moves and some right moves. One thing we all agree, Russell, Todd, and myself, Andrew as well, we'd never try to promote people past their superpower. So if our best engineer is writing code every day, we can't replace him and now have him manage others. One, because it's probably not his superpower. But two, we've now promoted him past his talent, not even outside of his talent, right? So we're actually very conscious of that. And we actually comp accordingly to that, where you can stay as an engineer or a marketing copywriter or a designer and stay in your lane and not feel like you have to move toward management to advance in your career. And that combined with not necessarily people raising their hand, the opposite. We'd literally drop people in a seat, see how they're doing, like, oops, sorry, like, move them fast. So trial and error, as weird as that sounds, but error fast.
That's really interesting. And I'm curious too, because I know that there's a huge shift happening in general in the entire industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I see it in my own kind of focus, which has been affiliate marketing and influencer marketing for the last 12 years. I'm seeing such a huge shift, particularly in like things like distribution, right? So we're starting to see that the rise of TikTok cannot be ignored.
Mm-hmm.
And also with things like OpenAI, how I'm very concerned about our affiliates that are, the history legacy blogs, mommy bloggers, content bloggers, listicles, like all of that, I feel like is very much in flow. And just kind of learning and seeing the landscape changing, I think in the biggest way that I've seen in the last 10 years. And I see that happening with ClickFunnels as well. And that sort of that industry that you guys are in. I'm curious, when you said that you guys consider yourself a startup, my first instinct was like, wait a minute, you're like one of the most well-known companies in this space. I would not think that most people would consider you to be a startup, but it sounds like you're feeling that scrappiness, that new kind of design because you're building this new thing. Why did you guys make that decision? And how do you believe, as much as you can share, that it's going to affect your current customer base and also set you up for the future? Because you guys are making these transitions because I feel like there's this shift happening in general in this space. And I'm just like really curious about that.
Yeah. So for us, the decision to build ClickFunnels 2.0 and move away from Classic was part visionary from Todd, where he thought the industry was going to be right now and is almost at. But to do it, we had to build it from scratch. And that's why we consider it a startup, because it's a brand new product. It's been basically the first year of ClickFunnels now in our mind was beta. And we were getting feedback because we built it effectively in the dark because we couldn't tell anyone, which would be normal for a startup, right? You're not out there beta testing to the 100,000 users you have, something you're building quietly on the side. So we had to do that publicly. And a startup that launches with 30,000 customers on day one doesn't get the same privileges that a startup that ClickFunnels the first time got when it had 100 people the first day. So we had to rapidly continue development, basically. And that's what we've done. And that's why we feel it's a startup, because in our minds, it is. It was built to truly empower entrepreneurs for the next decade, just like ClickFunnels did for marketers for the last decade. And that's a big thing to go for. And to answer the second part of the question, where do we really think it's going, without going into conspiracy theories, which I would love to do about it, but combine what's happening with OpenAI, blockchain technology, all the things that are happening in the world today, the ease of distribution of information and creation of information nowadays, to your point, the barriers are just going to eliminate, basically. I think the only barrier we're still dealing with is the walled gardens, right? So you look at the Facebooks, the Googles, those worlds, and, getting into my conspiracy theory, I think those are short-lived, coming up soon, because there's no reason for people to be in the way. Do we need Airbnb for you and I to rent a room?
Right. No.
Right. But they do. So they're as much of a walled garden as anyone else. So where we're seeing things going is, not to get too complicated into it, but really collaborative commerce. We're building something that you can easily get into, and we're going to continue to make it easier for people to use from day one. Even the newest stuff we've announced with called frameworks, where you can just find a complete model of a business, clone it into your system, get it up and running. You have everything, plus combine that with AI technology. You can be up and running an entire business model in a day.
Wow.
In technology, right? And that's actually not that hard. You just have someone that wants to share what they've built and the willingness to try. And as that happens, those businesses are going to want to connect without going through the walled gardens. Again, I could go on that for an hour and a half tangent on itself, but that's where we see it going. So we're building something that will create collaborative commerce in the future.
If you're looking to get even more from the Four Rooms podcast, you don't want to miss our exclusive newsletter. This is your personal invitation to join a community of like-minded entrepreneurs who are all about balancing health, wealth, scale, and relationships. Each week, we're going to bring you additional insights, tips, early announcements, and other information that we just can't fit into this podcast episode. Plus, it's a great way to keep the conversation going and ensure you never miss a beat in your entrepreneurial journey. It's easy to subscribe. Just visit fourroomsmastermind.com, scroll to the bottom of the page, and enter your email. That's fourroomsmastermind.com, and just enter your email. We promise to keep things light, keep your inbox interesting, informative, and fun. Join the Four Rooms community today, and let's grow together.
So walk me through like your definition of collaborative commerce, because I
Yep.
feel like everyone has like different definitions of things. So you touched on it a little bit, but I'd love to hear you go a little bit. And I know also we kind of have to hedge, right?
Yeah.
Because let's be real, there's competitors out there, and you're gonna launch it when you guys are ready, and I'm sensitive to that.
Yep.
But also from wanting to give like the most cutting edge info and like the best info I can, I just want to dig as much as you're comfortable and like what you consider to be collaborative commerce, and is this going to be in your mind ClickFunnels 3.0, or is this going to be like a totally separate style business serving more and different types of entrepreneurs? Like, I just like if you can share some of that.
I could answer most of those questions.
Okay.
So even ClickFunnels current and where we're going to go in the next 3 months is continue to push the envelope, again, focusing on getting up and running fast. And even Shopify currently, who we really think is our competitor, if you ask us who's competitor in our landscape, it's really the only one we're watching at this point. Even that requires plugins, requires complexity, requires training. I mean, yeah, you can get up and running fast, but are you really up and running? Right. And are you efficient and effective? And are you marketing correctly? So that's the first step for us. That's what we're obsessed with this quarter, is helping businesses get up and running fast and creating funnels, like funnels in their business, getting their marketing set up, getting their email sequences set up, like running real businesses. Then, to answer your question, collaborative commerce to me is when I have this business and I meet someone who has a business that's similar or supportive or could collaborate together. There's no good way right now for us to really collaborate. I could go tell you to sign up for my affiliate software platform. I could go send you a link that you can use to share with others, but the experience of that is very disconnected, right? Software affiliate, we just launched our internal affiliate platform, even so that you can run an entire affiliate platform inside of ClickFunnels. But even that is traditional. So collaborative commerce becomes just a very simple agreement with no complexities, where it's like, hey, I use my wife as an example. She has a pickleball brand and she does printed tees. As she's been running this business, she realized that printed tees are not the most profitable business in the world. So having a funnel selling printed tees alone is not great, which is classic ClickFunnels lessons, but she pays attention, but you don't learn it till you do it. But during that time, she met person after person after person who is running pickleball racket business because she's a networker, or a pickleball live event training, or a pickleball course, but they didn't have any way to collaborate. So where we see the future going is creating a simple mechanism for those 4 people to all collaborate together to create a funnel that builds something, and they can all promote each other without any complexity.
That's really interesting. I'm like starting to form it in my mind. Like, 'cause for me, the core of my career has been all partnerships. Like I'm so passionate about every business having a partnership channel inside of their business, because I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen, horror stories of someone, spending millions of dollars a month on Facebook and getting kicked off, and now they have no way to acquire customers.
Yep.
And there is a big barrier to entry to that in a lot of ways, not just around, the program itself. What are you running on? Is it native to your current tech stack? Like, how are you tracking it? Is the program competitive? The people who are your affiliates or people internally or team running it, the process. So hearing what you're saying, I'm kind of forming it in my mind. Where I'm like, I feel like that's going to make it so much easier for us to have partnerships with people that we want to collaborate with. And that network of support is so huge as an entrepreneur. Like for me, I think about when my former partner died by suicide. It was in November of 2019, and I could not work anymore. Like I lost my, I just I couldn't physically, mentally, emotionally do anything. And the way that we grew our business was and then this wasn't 4 rooms, it was my affiliate marketing company, was me speaking on stage. And then 3 months later, when I started being like, okay, maybe I can do something, COVID hit and I couldn't speak on stage anymore. And a bunch of my partners, which are really like my clients or sponsors, like you or Tony Grebmeyer with Ship Offers, they got together and they started promoting the new products that I was forced to launch. I was forced to launch like group coaching and some other stuff because I couldn't do anything else. And they saved my business. They saved our entire company. But there's a lot of like thinking through and processes and like learnings and exactly what you're talking about. Sending a link, oh, you promote this thing. And if we could have made it easier for them, I think the business would have grown instead of just surviving, right? And hearing what you guys are kind of building is really interesting because if we can make it easier for people to partner with other entrepreneurs and we can give them that safety net, like that's going to be really important and transformative for so many entrepreneurs in a really deep and impactful way. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, we're excited about it.
Yeah.
If you think about it, it's rooms like yours, like 4 rooms events, that historically was all there was. So relationships like that would happen in rooms like this.
Yeah.
Now, I think I'm going to quote this wrong, but I'm going to try and quote it anyways. I think Meta did $215 billion last year and didn't create any content. Not a single line.
Because their consumers were creating all the content, right? Yeah.
We all created it for them. Same with Google. Google didn't create any content. So they're holding power, but leveraging our content. If we bring that relationship back and we leverage our own content and we build relationships like we used to in the past, and technology can make it easier instead of harder, we can do it at scale, basically. So that's now getting into my conspiracy theories and where I think the world's going. But I do think it is back to classic micro relationships. But with technology, we can do it at scale, right? So just the way you're able to build a social following of 10,000 or 20,000 or 100,000 or, in Russell's case, 1 million people, the reach you can have just in something like that to then create a network effect to get the type of impact that you had when you had true partners and affiliates step up for you. That's exactly it. And it's the same thing on a micro scale. If you have a t-shirt business, you meet 4 people, and to make it quite simply, all of a sudden, instead of $2, you're now making $1,000 on your funnel a day. And it's impactful.
It's hugely impactful. I'm curious. I know I don't have all the time in the world with you. I could spend hours talking to you about stuff. I'm really curious around your thoughts. When you said that you were building basically like in stealth mode and there were some mistakes that you made, like I would love to hear like what were some of those mistakes that besides the communication with your team, did you feel like there were mistakes in like communication with your customers or other things that might have affected how you guys launched it, what you guys are doing next? Like, because you guys might consider yourselves a startup, but one of the reasons why I was so excited to have you guys come into 4 Rooms community in a bigger way was because I've looked to you and so many thousands of other companies in marketing have looked to your business as like, this is what's possible. This is business with a capital B. Like these guys have like made it, right? And in that way, you guys are very much like a trendsetter. And when you're out in front, you make mistakes, right? You do. And I'm curious, like, what were some of those mistakes that you guys made previously? And like, how are you guys going to address them? I know that I hear the team part that you guys are going to communicate in that, but what can like everyone outside looking towards you guys as like, these are the ones that have really made, I think, internet marketing in general a legitimate business. Like, what are some of the mistakes that you made and how are you going to like not do those in these future rollouts?
Yep. I mean, the obvious one is just the release process. And the change we've made internally, which is going to affect the customers, is we no longer promise release, then educate. And when you're launching a new product, especially for a large legacy company with hundreds of thousands of users and millions of followers, honestly. We misunderstood the expectations of the product, basically. So when we first released it, in our minds, we were releasing a beta product. And honestly, we probably didn't communicate that well to everyone. So we today, 2 years later, are still putting a final stamp on all the things we promised 2 years ago. We just finished our FHL International event. We released affiliate platform that Todd stood on stage 2 years ago and announced to people. So that's where we missed. We missed on selling the vision, but not setting expectations on the time frame that would have created probably more patience from our customers and a better way for us to communicate. While doing that, we got behind by like 3 years to our competitors. And we knew it because we had to go dark and do it. But now we're finally playing catch up. So my little pitch would actually be come back and take a look, right? If you were a ClickFunnels Classic user or you tried 2.0 in its early stages, it's a much different product now. And our process now, from what was a startup to now a completed product, if you see, we release new features every week. We send out a newsletter update telling you about them. We have an education team who's finally caught up to the stuff we've actually built so you can figure out how to use it. Like we just finally caught up to the 3 years of development that our team did. And that's the message is like, we're now running less like a startup, but we definitely have been for the last 2 years.
I love that perspective though. Like just like, hey, come back and come check us out. Right. Like I think it's something that you guys can do because you've had as much trust as you've had built in the industry. Like what you guys did, like really legitimized like so many businesses, legitimized so many internet marketers. And you guys have that trust factor with Russell, as a face. And even you coming on and talking on this podcast, it's so cool to everyone who's going to be listening to this to like hear how transparent you've been. And like, I feel like if I had left ClickFunnels, I would want to just come back because of all the goodwill that you guys built and that cannot be ignored, like that goodwill builds loyalty. And, just hearing that you guys didn't just do version 2.0, you guys rebuilt the whole thing from the ground up. It's like, even me as someone who is seeing things on the outside, there's a lot of things that clicked into my mind where I'm like, oh, okay, that's why there was that feedback, or that's why that particular thing was done. And I would be coming back, hearing that and hearing also how you're building things for the future. I'm excited about it and just feel really grateful to have you here teaching all of us here in Pasadena and being a part of our community, and excited for the future of ClickFunnels because you guys have been the leader in this. And I know that some people have come and maybe taken market share or whatever, but like hearing what you were building, I'm like, definitely the giant awakes, right? And I think that's really cool. And I'm excited for the future of ClickFunnels, and certainly would encourage anybody listening to this that maybe tried, the new version early to come back and to give it another shot and to really look at it, because not only are you solving critical issues now, you're very on tempo for the current times, but hearing what you guys are going to be building in the future would be crazy not to come back now, or at least come back when you guys roll out the new stuff. So I'm excited for everyone.
Yeah, come back now.
Yeah.
And you're there for us when you're ready.
Yeah.
And I just, first of all, thank you. Been fun. And I always want to point out, I think the most unique thing about ClickFunnels and the loyalty we have, we've always had more followers than users. And that's because Russell. I mean, Russell Brunson, I get to work with him and I still fanboy, he built this industry, he blazed a trail, and the technology's just always kept up, and we're just going to keep doing it. He's going to keep going. We're going to keep training and educating. So it's not just the software. Like we're going from a marketing technology point, but also a marketing strategic point. Like don't just pay attention to us, pay attention to Russell, and put those two things together into practice and your business will change.
I want to end on that note where like I'm behind the scenes on a lot of gurus, right? And not everyone I leave a fan. The ones that you can work this closely with, like you're working with him, and say that you're a fanboy still, shows the integrity that he has and how big his vision is and what a good leader he must be, right? And that means a lot to me, and I know it means a lot to consumers now when they're picking who they want to invest their dollars into, is investing it into a guru or a face that is who he says that he is on stage externally, that he's also that person internally. I think that's a really powerful point that I hope people are picking up on, because we're really voting with our dollars and who we invest in. And I believe the future for any founder or C-suite executive watching is that we continue to build our personal brands so that people understand who they're giving their money to. Right. And just hearing you say that, I'm like, that to me shows me that he is someone that is worth taking a second look at top down, because you're a man of super high integrity. And if you feel that way about him, working up close with him all this time, then that shows me that the future of ClickFunnels is even brighter than I would imagine because of that particular point. And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Right. I'm sure you've seen a lot of the gurus and the leaders, and sometimes you walk away feeling a little bit jaded, where you're like, that person is not who they pretend to be or showcase to be. And that makes me sad for that person's end consumer and end user and client, because they're buying into somebody that's not that. And so hearing that about Russell just makes me really happy and excited for ClickFunnels and for the clients. So
I love that.
Yeah, that's great. So thank you for being here. It's an honor to have you, and I'm excited to keep spending time with you over the next few days. And thanks for sharing, as much as you can about where ClickFunnels is going and supporting us here at Four Rooms. I really appreciate you.
It's been awesome. It's been my pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you.
As we wrap up today's episode, we have something special just for you. If you've been inspired by what we've explored today and you're ready to take your learning to the next level, then our Four Rooms Mastermind live event is the perfect next step. And because you're a part of our podcast family, we're offering an exclusive 10% discount on your registration when you apply and are accepted. This is your chance. It's your chance to build relationships with other ambitious entrepreneurs like yourself, to dive deeper into the 4 rooms of entrepreneurship, and to connect with experts who can truly help accelerate your growth. Simply follow the event link in the description of this episode and use the promo code 4rooms10. That's FOURROOMS10 on your application to claim this opportunity. This offer is subject to application approval and it's limited, so don't wait too long to make your decision. Join us and transform your journey with the insights and networking that only our live events can offer. Thank you for tuning in today. We look forward to seeing you at the event, and of course, right back here next time on the 4 Rooms podcast. Until then, keep balancing and keep growing.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you.